Welcome to Agape Ministries podcasts, a whole new way of thinking. Episode 19, Part 2 of Father Chris Thomas's teaching on the Beatitudes.
Welcome back to our reflection on the Beatitudes. Welcome to the graveyard shift. If you sleep, don't snore, and we'll carry on. So we began to reflect this morning on the Beatitudes. We looked at the first four of them. It's always struck me that these 8 short sayings lay out Jesus' teaching in a wonderfully concentrated and compelling format. And they challenge the essence of who we are and how we live as Christians. You know, discipleship is about allowing the Spirit to lead us deeply into the process of transformation. So that, as I said this morning, we're not just fans of Jesus, but followers of Jesus. And what does it mean to be a follower? What does it mean to be a disciple? It's got something to do with living out these Beatitudes that enable us then to be people who stand as a sign of what living life to the full is all about. If we're going to be honest, that means we have to change within. We have to begin to see things differently, and that's what metanoia is all about. You know, to live lives of compassion, to suffer with another person and with other people, to live a life of love and mercy, to live a life of forgiveness and justice is extraordinarily difficult. To live lives where we're always looking for goodness rather than badness, where we're filled every day with a spirit of awe and wonder at the very presence of God, isn't easy. To change our understanding of who God is, to change our understanding of who we are, poor worms no longer, it's never easy. We have to change. We have to enter into this process of metanoia. We have to learn how to embrace rather than to reject. And you know, I guess what it really comes down to is this wonderful word and the death of ego. Ego, for me, is that which filters everything through what I think, what I feel, what I understand. When we begin to allow that reality to die within, then we begin to learn how to love what is different than ourselves, without judgment or condemnation. Peacemakers, seekers of truth and justice, merciful ones will always see in that which is different the presence of God. But you know, I think the unpalatable truth is that anything that's other than we are frightens us. Anything that's different than we are, we push away. And often otherness and difference bring out the worst in us. It's not easy for us to be comfortable and at home and welcoming to what's other than we are. And yet welcoming what is other and different is a key biblical challenge. In the scriptures of all the great religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, God is other, defined as beyond the imagination, outside the realm of the familiar. You know, when the scriptures talk about God being holy, that's what they're talking about. God isn't holy because of some sort of moral quality or because of piety, but because of otherness and difference. That's why I find it a bit frustrating. You know, I've been in this renewal 40-odd years, and I do find it frustrating sometimes when we talk about knowing Jesus. You can never know Jesus. You can never know God. You can never penetrate the depths. And as long as you think you've got it all sorted in a nice, neat little package, you know, gee, it means we haven't even begun to start. Haven't even begun to scratch the surface. God is other. God is more. God is bigger than anything we can possibly imagine. And so we have in the scriptures the great revelation, really, that God comes mostly through the stranger, the foreigner, the unexpected, the unfamiliar, in what's different and in the surprise. And we love to think we know. And so the scriptures insist really on the importance of welcoming the stranger. God is other, and so strangers particularly are those who are most likely to be carrying God's revelation. And if you don't believe me, go into the First Testament. Look at the story of Abram, Sarai, and the birth of Isaac. The three strangers who come and have a conversation, go away, and Sarah, at the age of whatever age she's supposed to be, finds herself pregnant. It comes through the stranger, the revelation of God. Look at how often Isaiah and the prophets speak of the word of God coming through those considered to be other. Ahaz, for example, was a pagan king, and yet God used him. Naaman was a foreign general. How often does Jesus in the Gospels show that the revelation of God comes through the life of someone who is considered other, like a Samaritan, or a leper, or a tax collector, or a prostitute? Why would I talk about this key biblical challenge? Why would I talk about otherness when we're supposed to be reflecting on the Beatitudes? Can't you just get on with it? Because to live the Beatitudes is to live a life of open vulnerability. And I think today, more than any previous generation, we're being stretched to move beyond what's familiar. We live in multicultural societies. How do we encounter God in that which is different? You know, I'm pretty sure that our clamour in our country at the moment over the border issue has got a lot to do with not wanting to be stretched, not wanting to be open to otherness. And I personally think that's quite sad and the cause of much of the world's problem. Now, it is true to say that to be open can be both painful and disorientating at times. You know, it's not easy to have your boundaries, your values and ideas under constant redefinition. But if we can learn to enter into the mystery of God, we will learn to love the other. We will learn to be open to what the other brings, and then we can transform the world. I think it's the heart of what the scriptures are inviting us into, and it's right at the heart of the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. You know, mature religion isn't about creating an in-club where we feel good and we can wave our hands in the air and sing nice songs to Jesus. Mature religion is about transforming history. It's about transforming the stuff of this world. It's about letting the mystery of God loose in our lives so that we can learn to love otherness and recognize the presence of God in the other, and not simply keep handing on judgment and condemnation from one generation to the next. When we begin to live like that, as Richard Rohr says, we can build something new, good, and forever original, while neither playing the victim nor making victims of others. We can be free conduits of grace into the world. You know, it's a tall order to live in that way, but we don't do it alone. When we began this morning, I asked you to take a look at one another. You might remember, God is in our midst. God is present. Once we've set our faces to follow the Lord, once we enter into metanoia, we have a power within that we can draw on. The Spirit of God is within us, so that we can live this life of the Beatitudes, this sense of open vulnerability where we're always looking for the presence of God everywhere and in everything. So what we're going to try and do now is move on and look at the next 4 Beatitudes and see where they lead us into the way they lead us into the Sermon on the Mount. So blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. I was once told that the word mercy means undeserved kindness. Isn't that lovely? Undeserved kindness. You know, mercy doesn't come to us because of any merit on our part. It's undeserved. And the older I get, the more I find myself thanking God each day for mercy. Thanking God each day for that free gift of undeserved kindness which is lovingly poured out and which demands nothing. Demands nothing. It's a gift from the one who is always the giver. The one who never demands repayment. Mercy is simply there for the asking. And I think to begin to realize that brings the most extraordinary freedom. Now, I think it's worth noting that there's an exchange going on here. We give mercy and we receive mercy. We receive mercy, we give mercy. The root word of the word mercy comes from an old Etruscan word, merc, which also gives us commerce and merchant. It's about exchange. Cynthia Bourgeot, the Episcopalian priest I quoted this morning, says this: usually we think of the mercy of God as a kind of divine clemency, and we pray, Lord, have mercy upon us, as a confession of our weakness and dependency. But in this other understanding, mercy is not something God has so much as it's something that God is. Exchange is the very nature of divine life, of consciousness itself. According to modern neurological science, and all things share in the divine life through the participation in the dance of giving and receiving. There is a supposedly brilliant young South African teacher called Michael Brown. He's written a book called The Presence Process. And he says this: giving is receiving is the energetic frequency upon which our universe is aligned. All other approaches to energy exchange immediately cause dissonance and disharmony in our life experience. Jesus seems to instinctively know this. And so this beatitude invites us to enter into a deeper trust in the flow of mercy between us and God, and us and humanity. But of course, much of what we actually do in the world damages the flow of mercy. And so the challenge to be merciful is to turn around, enter into the mercy of God, and become that conduit of mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. What is purity of heart? I guess for many people it's got to do with sex and being virtuous. It would be roughly synonymous with chastity, perhaps even with celibacy. Maybe not. But in wisdom teaching, purity means singleness. And the proper translation of this beatitude is really, blessed are those whose heart is not divided. Is your heart divided? And how much is it divided? Where is your focus? When Jesus was baptized in the Jordan, he came out of that experience of the love of God as a whole human being. The Aramaic word that describes this is idahaya, meaning the single one, the one who's unified his or her being. Now, according to Jesus, this transformation, this unity takes place within the heart. So when your heart becomes single, when it desires one thing only, when you can live in relationship, then you see God. So this beatitude is all about cleansing the lens of perception. It's about opening your eyes and seeing the presence of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. This beatitude really follows as the logical consequence of all that we've talked about so far. Because when our hearts are gentled, as we spoke about this morning, when the raging forces that go on within us are calmed, when our hearts are single, then we become peacemakers. We no longer need to divide the world into good and bad, insiders and outsiders. It's then that our own inner peace flows into the world, because harmony, compassion, love of the other flows through us. But sadly, what most of us do is divide and separate. He's good, she's bad. She's great, he's terrible. We set up camps of the like-minded. We reject that which is different and other, and that leads to disharmony. It leads to anger, it leads to suspicion. And yet Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know, Jesus isn't talking about martyrdom here, in case any of you are terrified. But he's talking about freedom. You know, there were many gospels written about Jesus. We focused on the 4 that we have and said they are the authentic reflections of what the Spirit was trying to say to us. But there are many other Gospels that were written, and one of them which many people reflect on and read is called the Gospel of Thomas. And it records this beatitude with a slight difference that Cynthia Bourgeau, the Episcopalian priest, says captures the very essence of Jesus' meaning and throughout the Beatitudes. Blessed are you in the midst of persecution, who when they hate you and pursue you, even to the core of your being, cannot find you anywhere. Whoops, that shouldn't have happened. Whoa. Talk about freedom. I often remember the words or reflect on the words of John McCarthy, who said of his captors in Beirut, they can imprison my body, but never my mind. You know, whatever this liberation might be, whatever this detachment is about, it's to be so detached that when we are persecuted, our inner being isn't damaged. Our inner being isn't broken. Whatever is thrown at us can never destroy that which is within. And that involves, to get to that place, I think, involves a slow process of letting go, of entrusting ourselves to God. It's why Mary Craig said that the saddest thing about our suffering is that we don't learn from it, because situations of persecution can often be great teaching tools if we have the courage to use them in that way. So 2 seconds while I get my head together. How are you feeling about the Beatitudes now? Have a chat with one another. Okay, everyone, if you'd like to come back together. So I hope that you can see that these 8 little sentences in Matthew's Gospel show us that Jesus is talking about a radical inner transformation of consciousness, which comes about through a willingness to enter into a relationship with God, to turn around and allow the light to shine, that it involves a commitment to domesticate that within us which is violent and aggressive, and above all, a passionate desire to unify the heart and embrace that which is other, seeing the face of God everywhere. Now, as the Sermon on the Mount goes on, what Matthew has Jesus do is to spell out practically how a person who is filled with the spirituality of the Beatitudes would live. And so he tells us that we are salt of the earth and light to the world. That what salt is to food the followers of Jesus are to the world. We're to give a taste to life. A life that would otherwise seem bland and insipid. But you know, we can only give others a zest for life if we have a zest for life ourselves. Gee, how many people look at them and say, oh, they're Christian, they enjoy life. Light and dark are symbols of good and evil. Jesus calls us to be a light that dispels the darkness of the world, the gloomy shadows that can sometimes overpower us. How often are we overpowered by the gloom and the darkness? And yet light gives vision, it gives perception, it gives clarity. And so Jesus says, salt of the earth and light to the world. Love your enemies. Over and over again, Jesus invites us to go further than we've ever gone before. You've heard how it was said. Well, I say this to you. Love your enemies. Must be one of the most revolutionary messages of all of Jesus' teaching. Love those who hurt you. Those who are filled with this spirit of the Beatitudes will love their enemies. Ronald Rolheiser writes this: in the Gospel of Matthew, the moral heart of discipleship is articulated by Jesus in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. At its center lies this challenge: can you love an enemy? Can you truly forgive someone who's hurt you? Can you bless someone who's cursed you? Can you be good to those who have done you harm? Can you forgive a murderer? This challenge is what sets Jesus' moral teaching apart from others and gives it its unique character and its real teeth. This is meant to be the distinguishing mark of a follower of Jesus. He or she can love and forgive an enemy. Hugely challenging. We can't do that by ourselves. That's why I talked before about the spirit that is within us. This power of God's love at work within, flowing out through us into the lives of others. We need the power of God. And so Matthew says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. With the love of God, you can even love those who have hurt you. You can. Don't look at me with those disbelieving faces. You really, really can. Are you known for the forgiveness that lies in your heart? Are you seen to be someone who leads the way in that whole arena of forgiveness? What is your reaction to those who've hurt you, or those who have hurt those you love? What about those who commit atrocities against the whole of humanity? Some of you will be familiar with G. Walker. G. Walker's son Anthony was killed in Liverpool in a place called Huyton simply because he had a different skin colour than others. We invited G to come to one of our conferences with Sister Helen Prejean, the nun in the film Dead Man Walking. And G shared her walk in this whole area of forgiveness. And this is what she said. It moved me powerfully. I have to forgive them. I can't hate. It's because we don't just preach it, we practice it. I forgive them. I have got to forgive them. My family and I still stand by what I believe, forgiveness. It will be difficult, but we have got no choice but to live on for Anthony. Love your enemies. You can't do that without the love of God flowing within you. And that theme goes on in the Lord's Prayer when we're invited to pray for forgiveness, which I once heard described as the greatest sign of the kingdom of God. It's a very simple prayer, the Lord's Prayer, focusing on God and God's providence. But it also reminds us that when we pray it, our words and deeds have to reflect one another. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We have to ask the question, how can we love our enemies? What does it mean for us? In the Lord's Prayer, we're invited to enter into this kingdom relationship I spoke about this morning, this new way of relating to God, to relate to God as Jesus does. Abba, most wonderful word, Abba. I really only understood that word when I was staying in Jerusalem with my friend George, who is a Coptic Christian, a Palestinian. And he left me one day with his little boy, Rafi, while he went to the shops. And Rafi and I were watching Spider-Man. Didn't enthrall me too much, but anyway, Rafi was absolutely transfixed by this film. And then George came home and he walked into the house and he had his arms full of bags. He'd done the weekly shop. And Rafi, he was about 6, hurled himself, literally threw himself through the air and threw himself onto his dad, and he kept shouting, Abba, 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 over and over. That's when I got it. Seriously. I'd known it up there. That's when I understood it. When we know God as Abba, that chasm of love opens up and we're drawn into it and it flows from us. Beatitudinal living, it's a good word that, isn't it? I didn't expect that one to come out, but anyway, beatitudinal living, is about somehow living caught up in the flow of Abba. And it's in that relationship that we pray for the coming of God's kingdom. It's in that relationship we pray for the power to forgive others. It's in that relationship that we love our enemies. After the Lord's Prayer, Jesus tells us again not to be hypocrites. How often are we hypocritical? He tells us not to be hypocrites with regard to fasting, but I guess you can take it at a more general level. If you look at Isaiah, Jesus fasting is about the hunger and thirst for justice. And then, in the remainder of chapter 6 of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus invites us to examine our scale of values and our priorities. He says our eyes should be like a lamp that give light to our souls. If we're blind to truth, we live in darkness. He also reassures us of something that, I know is a huge issue for all of us. Some of you might tell me it's not afterwards, but let me tell you now, I don't believe you. Jesus says, do not worry. Do not worry or be anxious. I remember, probably 40 years ago, Frances Hogan standing up in front of a group of people, and I think she might have been teaching on Matthew's Gospel, but she said something like, who trusts in God? And everybody... Who's worried about the family? And everybody makes the point. So don't worry or be anxious, because this new relationship, this Abba relationship, this new world order is about trusting God more than anything else. It's not foolishness to trust God. That's how Jesus lived. And the disciples are meant to be like the Master. And so again, another question that we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean for us to say that we trust in God? What does it really mean? And then chapter 7 carries on. It's almost like a relentless roundabout that you can't get off. This is it. This is what it's about. And you can try and pretend and think it's all about going to church and getting on your knees and saying the rosary. You can do all that. It's absolutely fine. But this is what it's about. This is the core of Jesus' teaching. Beatitudinal living. Do not judge. Chapter 7 reminds us of the radical nature of following the Lord. Do not judge. I wish I had a second in my life when I didn't. We're almost programmed to judge. Why are we not supposed to judge? Because judgment destroys community. Judgment stops people living. And Jesus illustrates it all with the commandment about the saying, about the splinter and the plank. You know, it's a simple fact that we don't see our own faults, and when we do, we try and push them on somebody else. It takes the heat off. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, says, "By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are, which others are just as entitled to as we are." Love one another. It goes on. You know, this verse, in verse 12 of chapter 7, sees the whole of the First Testament summed up in a single sentence. Love one another. If you love, you won't judge. You won't condemn. If you love, you'll forgive. If you love, you'll be a peacemaker. If you love, you'll be merciful. Love one another. It's the absolute essence of this gospel we say we follow. Scholars call it the golden rule. Love your neighbour as yourself. Whoever that neighbour may be, you know, the black man, the addict, the gay people. Love your neighbour. Love otherness. Love the Muslim and the Hindu. Love. The core of what we're about. A few years ago, I went to listen to a priest from South America who travels around the world talking about base communities, sharing with his people his vision for the future of the church. And at one point, it was really interesting to listen to, but at one point he said something which in my guts I know to be true. He said, "The future of the church does not depend on how many priests we have or don't have." I mean, there are solutions to that, but we won't go into that. But, you know, the future of the church does not depend on how many priests we might have, or whether we can get to Mass. The future of the church depends on how willing believers are to get down on their knees and wash the feet of those in need. Because that's where our credibility lies. And yet, you know, as I said before, it just struck me like a gale force wind that he was absolutely right. Especially when you read passages from the gospel where Jesus says, basically, that it's not how often you're in church that matters, or how many prayers you say that determine your level of faith. When I was first ordained, I was sent to the town of St. Helens as a full-time youth chaplain, and I used to have lunch with a De La Salle brother who was well in his 80s. And Dennis would always say the same thing to me. Now, I was never quite sure whether it was because he'd lost it a bit or whether he thought I was so thick he needed to keep repeating it. But he used to say to me, "You know, Chris, when we stand before God, we'll not be asked, 'Did you go to Mass every Sunday? Did you keep the commandments?' The simple question we'll be asked is, 'Did you love?'" And that's why Jesus makes such a point about it in this beatitudinal living that he's talking about. It's very challenging, you know, to recognize that we as church are called to serve the world. It's what the documents from the Second Vatican Council were so keen to say to us. Paul VI closed the Holy Year in 1975 by saying this: "The work of the church is to create a society of sharing, solidarity, and love." That's what the living of the Beatitudes and the spelling out in the Sermon of the Mount, that's what it results in. A society of sharing, solidarity, and love. And Jesus called it all the kingdom of God. We're invited to allow this kingdom to grow within us. We're invited to allow this kingdom, this relationship, to so grow that it fills every fibre of our being, and that it transforms the world because it fills us so fully. And the only thing that matters really in Matthew's Gospel in these couple of chapters is that we do the will of God. You know, the desire to do the will of God is the essence of Jesus' mission. And you might be agonizing in your seat saying, well, I don't know what the will of God is for me. I've never known it. Yes, you do. Love one another. Love your enemies. Do not judge. You know what the will of God is. We all know what the will of God is. Again, Richard Rohr, reflecting on discipleship, says, it's not anyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, who will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the person who does the will of my Father in heaven. What counts, he says, is listening to Jesus, letting him teach you how to live. Isn't that what we've been trying to reflect on all day today? What counts is becoming his personal disciple. Isn't that what we've been reflecting on? A word which originally meant pupil or learner. What counts is doing what Jesus teaches. And yet so often we run away from it. Both through the scriptures and through personal contact in prayer. And what Jesus teaches is always the will of God. And then Matthew finishes it all by saying Jesus spoke with authority. You bet. You know, he believed what he spoke and he lived out of that belief. So Jesus, the new Moses, the new lawgiver, tells us it's all about the heart and the conversion of the heart to the way of Beatitudes, the way of compassion, mercy and love. He takes the old law, given in the form of tablets of stone, he takes the old law and he supersedes it with a law that is written deeply within us and which becomes a way of living. And so to a final, gosh, I've done it again, dead on half two, a final quotation from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who says this: the renewal of the church will come from a new type of monasticism which only has in common with the old an uncompromising allegiance to the Sermon on the Mount. It is high time people banded together to do this. So thank you for listening. Let go of what hasn't been helpful and hold on to what has. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to these episodes. And we hope this teaching on the Beatitudes will help you to find that freedom to live by faith, hope and love. So tune in next week when we'll have some teaching by Michelle Moran. But until we meet again, stay safe and God bless.